The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. Now, while wrestling is mostly predetermined, what happens when the unpredetermined decides it's going to throw a monkey wrench into the works? Take, for example, the first ever Universal Champion. Sometimes injury changes the way a long-term storyline is supposed to play out, and as a result, new storylines have to be crafted on the fly. And that's the subject of this episode. Oh, and that reminds me, congratulations yet again to Mr. and Mrs. Matty Action, and thank you for the topic idea, because today, Dave knows 7 times that injury ruined major storylines. Mr. Kennedy! Kennedy! I always forget about the second one. Since his debut in August of 2005, Ken Kennedy showcased while he may not be the best in-ring technician, that he definitely had a whole lot of personality, something that the company was definitely lacking at the time. And his charisma was bankable enough that the WWE decided that he was going to win Money in the Bank in 2007 at WrestleMania 23. However, following his biggest win in the company, Ken Kennedy would start suffering from an arm injury and receive a diagnosis of a several-month-long recovery period. And then he would wind up losing his Money in the Bank briefcase to Edge. Now, this was supposed to be a part of Mr. Kennedy's ascent to the top, and as I briefly mentioned in a previous video, Kennedy also had a storyline earmarked for him where he would have been revealed as the illegitimate third McMahon child. That's right, it was supposed to be Mr. Kennedy and not Hornswoggle. This would have led to Kennedy eventually having a feud with Triple H, but all that was thrown right out the window because Vince McMahon loves holding a grudge against guys who have vulnerable human bodies. Oh yeah, well how about this? Industrial my ass. And to make matters worse, Kennedy's original diagnosis was a bit premature. Upon further testing, it was revealed that his recovery time would actually just be a few weeks and not several months, meaning that this whole thing could have been completely avoided. Number 6. Seth Rollins. Triple H vs. Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 32 might very well be the worst main event in WrestleMania history. Although I will admit Roman Reigns might have topped himself the following year. Oh, and I was at WrestleMania 32 and I seriously thought about leaving early just so I could beat the traffic. But one of the reasons why the WrestleMania 32 main event was just so terrible was because there was a different main event already planned out for it that was part of a long-term storyline. But unfortunately, that got sidelined along with Seth Rollins thanks to a November house show in Dublin, Ireland. Rollins would injure his knee attempting a sunset flip powerbomb onto Kane. Seth would need surgery and would be benched for 6 months. Now the problem was the Architect was in the middle of a long title run of 220 days when he was stripped of the title. And it was during this run that he managed to retain the title in matches against everyone from John Cena to Brock Lesnar to even Sting. Now the story here was that the Authority was setting up challenge after challenge after challenge for him in order to make him a better champion. And this was all supposed to culminate at WrestleMania with Seth Rollins taking on Triple H as the finale to his championship trials. Kinda like Lino taking on Mummer at the end of the Anointment trials, but nowhere near as awesome. Oh, and kudos to you if you got that reference. And so instead, this match had to wait an entire year to WrestleMania 33, and it almost didn't happen yet again thanks to Seth Rollins' knee. Number 5. Bret Hart. Following the Montreal Screwjob, Bret Hart was the hottest commodity in all of wrestling. However, a broken hand that he earned by punching Vince McMahon kept him out of the ring upon his debut in the WCW. And as a result, World Championship Wrestling tried to shoehorn Bret into the main event between Hogan and Sting. Now this is a perfect example of WCW's failures when it comes to booking. And as luck would have it, Bret Hart would actually bookend his tenure in the WCW, leaving because of an injury caused by one of WCW's biggest successes in terms of booking. I'm talking about Goldberg, the green and awful wrestler in terms of technical prowess and professional ability. He was a great example of the power of booking. Despite his total lack of talent, WCW was able to book him into being a top superstar. And also in a rare example of Vince Russo actually booking well for a change, he decided that Bret was out of the main event spotlight for way too long, and it was high time that he returned to the title picture. But then, almost as fast as it started, Bret Hart's push came to an end along with his career, all because Bill Goldberg has no idea how to kick in professional wrestling. Next, Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan has been continually supported by fans, even if the WWE thinks otherwise. Now, this is especially true of WrestleMania 30. Fans of the American Dragon, including CM Punk, thought that the main event of WrestleMania 30 should have gone to a full-timer and someone who definitely deserved it, and not someone like, oh, I don't know, Bautista? And the fans, for the most part, got their wish, even if CM Punk had already left, with Daniel Bryan standing victorious at the end of the granddaddy of them all. However, following that, Daniel Bryan started noticing a loss of strength in his right arm, and he would announce on May 12th that he would be undergoing neck surgery, and then he would have the title completely stripped from him on June 9th. And then upon his return, he was eliminated from the Royal Rumble instead of winning it and being put back in the title picture. Now this was all because, with a few notable exceptions, the WWE tends not to put the strap around the waist of someone who seems to be injury prone. And this time it would seem that they were actually right, because Daniel Bryan would win the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania 31 in an attempt to elevate that title status. But he would end up retiring very soon thereafter. And even without Daniel Bryan, they still wanted a new up-and-coming babyface. And unfortunately for all of us, they decided on Roman Reigns.
Number 3, Sting.
In order to be the man, you got to beat the man. And going into the 90s in the WCW, from Booker to champion, well, Ric Flair was definitely the man. Flair and the Horsemen were now faces, with Sting, their former rival, now their newest member. Now this was all setting up for the Horsemen and the Nature Boy to reveal their true nature by reigniting the rivalry with Sting. Now this was supposed to end with Sting overcoming the odds and being crowned as a brand new champion at Wrestle War, and thus bringing in a brand new era into World Championship Wrestling. However, at Clash of the Champions 10, the very night of Sting and Ric Flair's falling out, Sting would blow out his knee during a brawl with the Horsemen. WCW then Executive Vice President Jim Herd decided that Ric Flair would actually face Lex Luger, who would replace Sting in the storyline. Flair had different plans. He refused to drop the belt to Luger because he said that he promised to drop the belt to Sting and was awaiting his return. Now this caused a mini civil war of sorts backstage, with some people believing that Ric Flair, by doing right by Sting, was actually doing right by the company, and others thinking that Ric Flair was just drunk off of his own power. In the end, Herd removed Flair from his booking position, and this eventually led to Flair being removed from the company altogether and joining the WWF. And also, Sting's popularity demanded that he be on TV even if he couldn't wrestle, and that ended up exposing us to the awfulness that was the bromance between Sting and RoboCop.
Number 2, Bam Bam Bigelow.
Bam Bigelow made his debut in the WWF with a whole host of managers vying to represent him, much in the same way that the Macho Man did. And if you're following in the footsteps of Randy Savage, then you must be off to a good start, one that would follow into the very first Survivor Series. Bam Bam was the last man on Hulk Hogan's team, even outlasting the Hulkster himself. And even though he didn't win, he did manage to hold his own, taking down both King Kong Bundy and the one-man gang before eventually losing to Andre. But hey, there's no shame in that. His look, his promos, his ability for a man his size, and the monster push all led people to believing that Bam Bam was destined for greatness. However, being one of the best big men of all time definitely came with a price, with Bam Bam needing double knee surgery that he felt couldn't wait any longer. Bam Bam himself even stated that Vince McMahon was going to put the title on him until he elected to go under the knife. Now while Paul Heyman would give Bam Bam a run with the strap in the ECW, he never got the big one in the WWF. But just imagine, in the 80s there could have been another major babyface. A babyface with a head full of fire tattoos.
And number 1, Magnum TA.
Before Sting, Magnum TA was shaping up to be the biggest babyface to not work for the WWF. Now this was an especially crucial time, with Dusty Rhodes having a backstage role as head booker and Hulk Hogan rejoining the WWF. Magnum TA could have been the guy to keep the competition between the NWA and the WWF on a more even keel. Now the NWA's plan was to slow build Magnum TA's climb to the top. Magnum TA had the whole all-American working man gimmick, a successful formula as proven by Dusty Rhodes. And with Dusty having the book, you knew that the gimmick would be done correctly. However, Magnum TA would crash his Porsche on a rainy night, and he would never wrestle again. Now at the time, Magnum TA was feuding with the Russian nightmare Nikita Koloff, and he was slated for a US title win, which would eventually lead to him getting into the world title picture against Ric Flair, the working man versus the rich boy. This resulted in Nikita Koloff turning face, having found respect for Magnum TA and being saddened by this tragedy. However, this would leave wrestling always wondering, what if? Well, there you go, there's my list. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and this has been Dave Knows.